Can you feel it roaring down the track? What is it? It's the hype train for BYU basketball.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, coming up on today's show, we're talking BYU basketball and the hype that is building 6 months away from tip-off of the upcoming season. We'll also talk about a big-time visit for BYU basketball, a guy who could be a part of the rotation and could benefit from BYU's style of play immensely if he picks the Cougars. And we'll finish up today's show on the football front with Reggie. Who is Reggie Frischknecht and why did he commit to BYU? We're getting into all that ahead on the podcast. All right, so let's dive right in. If you guys did not see this yesterday, the first iteration of projections for next year's March Madness and NCAA Tournament brackets are out. I know that sounds crazy to say because it is still technically April. It's April 30th as of recording of this podcast. And that's crazy talk. But Joe Lunardi, he is back at it. The resident bracketologist at ESPN, he has put out his first projections of next year's brackets. And where does BYU check in? They check in as a 2 seed. That is why I'm talking about the hype here for BYU basketball. The hype for BYU is obviously going to be immense this season. That comes with the territory. When you recruit the top-rated player in the recruiting class for many, many months, I know that different recruiting services have AJ Dybantsa, whether it's at the top or as the second-rated recruit in the recruiting class. Regardless, he is a top-tier talent. Most people believe if he was in this year's NBA draft, he would go number 1 over some guy named Cooper Flagg. That is how good of a player BYU has on campus. If you did not see it yesterday on social media, he's already posting, hey, I'm in college now. It's crazy to consider that, but he's here. He's working out, obviously going through his first iterations as a collegiate basketball player, going to class. He'll obviously be doing workouts with his teammates and coaches later on in the spring and summer months before they officially convene for training camp in the fall. But the bigger point to be made is that Joe Lunardi, he believes that BYU is going to be a top tier program this coming season. If you're a 2 seed, you are favored to make it to the Elite 8. And if everything goes chalk, that's when you bow out. But the crazy thing is, 2 seeds routinely make the Final Four, have been very capable of winning national championships. And that is the caliber of program that Joe Lunardi is projecting this BYU men's basketball program to be. And I think it's well-founded. The only team in the Big 12 Conference that is favored ahead of BYU, if you go by these projections, are the Houston Cougars. Now, Houston came up short in that national title game to Florida. They will want to make another run at a national title, and they'll have that chance under Kelvin Sampson. He has proven very, very capable of taking teams time after time after time deep into the NCAA tournament. But BYU is apparently the second best team in the Big 12, according to what Lunardi is projecting, because the only other two within the striking distance of BYU are Iowa State and Arizona, who both check in as 3 seeds in this initial projection. BYU was the gritty underdog last year. They were the 13th. I don't remember where they were picked. 10th, excuse me. In the preseason poll in the Big 12. It's 13th in football, but 10th in basketball. And they'd come off a pretty stellar season, finishing 5th in the conference under Mark Pope. Then Kevin Young comes in, revamps the roster, and there was a lot of question marks about what BYU could accomplish last year. Remember, they overachieved by every measure that you can imagine. A 9-game win streak to finish up conference play. They carried that momentum on into the Big 12 tournament and obviously made a fine run in the NCAA tournament, making it to the Sweet 16. I really think BYU broke through last year and surprised folks. This year, though, you are no longer the underdog. You are no longer the team that is going to be overlooked. You now have a target on your back. That's what Kevin Young, AJ Dybantsa, Richie Saunders, Robert Wright III, on down the list of the who's who of BYU basketball. They have to understand they have gone from being the hunter to now being the hunted. And that is something you have to embrace. BYU basketball will have a lot of pressure on it this year. It comes with the territory, as I said, getting guys like AJ Dybantsa into this program, bringing him back a guy the caliber of Richie Saunders, adding some transfer portal guys like a Dominic Diomande, Robert Wright III, etc., Kennard Davis Jr. All of those things lead to people believing that you are going to be one of the best programs in the entire country, if not just the Big 12 Conference. That is going to cause a lot of people to give you their best shot because they want nothing more than to slay Goliath out there. And that is something that BYU under Kevin Young, I think, is going to embrace wholeheartedly, and they're not going to shy away from it. Now, will they be able to stand up under that pressure, or will it crush them? Only time will tell, because the production, the wins, everything that you need to see to gauge if BYU succeeds in this circumstance, that's months away. As I mentioned, we're still in April. We're more than 6 months away from the tip-off of the BYU basketball season, but it is a steady build of hype. I use the analogy of a train track, a locomotive coming down a train track in the open of today's show. It's exactly what it is. It's only picking up more momentum as we go along here. Now, could things obviously derail that? Sure, they could. But everything right now screams that BYU basketball is hurtling down that track, and all they are doing is picking up more speed, more momentum, and they should be a team that is going to be a force in college basketball this season. I, for one, cannot wait to watch what the encore is for Kevin Young in year 2 as a collegiate basketball coach. He admitted at multiple points last year that he was still learning about all the ins and outs of coaching in high-level college basketball, and if he was still learning on the job in many respects, what a marvelous job he did. Now with a year under his belt, what more can he do? The talent he's assembled already, and they still have 4 roster slots open. We'll talk about one that can be filled shortly in just a moment. But he has compiled a fantastic roster already. I already said earlier this week, for those of you who are everydayers on this podcast, the BYU starting 5 absolutely has a shout as maybe the best in the entire country. It is that good, is that high caliber of the players that are in that starting 5. Now, 5 guys obviously can help BYU do some special things, but the strength of BYU last year was in its depth as well. The fact that they could throw 11 or 12 guys at you in any given game and overwhelm you, that's a big plus. And if BYU can have the caliber of talent they have in their starting unit, led by a guy like AJ Dybantsa and Richie Saunders, but then have capable 6 through 10 in terms of your rotation, those bench players, the frontline bench players, they're going to be even that much more critical to help BYU through tough instances. There's no way that BYU will go through a season unscathed. That's just not going to happen. I don't expect that. But this is a BYU team that has got a whole lot of momentum behind it, and it's only going to get bigger and better as we get along here down the track a little bit further to complete the analogy. And I really do look forward to seeing what BYU basketball can do. But as that momentum builds, so does the pressure. Will BYU hold up under that pressure? We're all about to find out in a few months' time. All right, coming up next, we're going to stay with the BYU basketball theme. Who is Tyler Miras, and what does he offer to Kevin Young and company that could help them, as we talked about, potentially get over the top in the Big 12, if not the NCAA tournament? We'll delve into that next. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monarch Money. Now, Monarch Money is here for you guys to help you out with your money. Every time you check your bank account, you're like me and you're wondering, hey, where did all that money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, among a myriad of different things, it's easy to lose track of that money, and that's where Monarch Money comes in as your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center, tracking all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you stop just managing your money and actually start building wealth along the way. Obviously, all of us want to be smarter when it comes to our money. Instead of juggling multiple apps to track it all and stay on top of it, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track all that spending, and even plan your long-term goals of what you would like to set away for your future. The best part is you can take control of your finances with a special offer from our friends at Monarch Money. All you got to do is use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's half off, my friends. That's monarchmoney.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. Check them out today at monarchmoney.com. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday whenever you hear and or watch this. Appreciate all of you for tuning in. If you have not done so already, subscribe, rate, review, share the show with your family and friends, and help build the audience even more than you've already done so to this point. But a big thank you, as always, for tuning in. All right, today BYU welcomes Tyler Meares to campus for a visit out of the transfer portal. Now, who is he? What does he offer to the BYU basketball program? That's probably what you're wondering. Well, he's a 6'7" wing player from the University of Idaho, who spent the last 2 seasons in Moscow up there in, I want to say it's central Idaho, but Moscow's technically northern Idaho, I think. Those of you who are Idaho natives, you can correct me on that. But the nice part is he shot 38.2% from 3 last season as one of the best players on an Idaho team that was sub 500. He actually played against BYU last year. It's kind of funny, some of the connections these guys that BYU's added to their roster. A lot of them have played against the Cougars, and maybe they stood out in those games to Kevin Young and said he kind of wrote down notes. Pay attention to this player. I can't guarantee that, but after scoring 17 points last year in the Marriott Center in a loss to BYU, Meares impressed. He was 4 of 8 from 3 in that game. He's a leading scorer for Idaho in that, and went on to have a very strong season. And as I mentioned, he's 6'7". He is a wing player who's got length. He's got an ability to shoot from the perimeter, and that is exactly what BYU is looking for as one of its keys that it needs to have on its remaining roster, and that is bench shooting. Now, how much is Meares looking for in terms of playing time? Because simply put, BYU cannot guarantee him, I think, a starting job. And in fact, I'd be hard-pressed to believe that they would even guarantee him that, hey, you're going to be part of the rotation guaranteed. He will have to earn that opportunity in Kevin Young's system. No coach is going to guarantee a role player a role. They have to earn that role. But the stats suggest that he can replicate that. And with the star power that BYU basketball already has, he, in theory, should get even more open looks than he already had with Idaho in the Big Sky last year. Playing in the Big 12, that's a leap up, obviously. And I have question marks about his ability to guard his position adequately. And also, BYU, they rebounded as a team, and he averaged 3.2 rebounds last year. As a 6'7" wing player in BYU's system, you've got to be able to rebound at a high clip as well. Will that translate over? Those are questions that remain unanswered and likely will remain unanswered until he decides if he's going to attend BYU and ultimately does enroll and play for Kevin Young and the Cougars. The thing about it is, though, there's not a ton out there that BYU can look at and say, you know what? That's a top-tier talent. You're filling out your roster now. If the House settlement goes through, and I fully expect it to at some point in the near future, there are going to be 15 roster slots. Currently, there's 17, but there's 15 in the post-House settlement era if all goes according to plan. And at last count, BYU has 11 of those roster slots spoken for. They have a lot of wing players, obviously, but the wings are where BYU generates most of its looks, most of its offense, and frankly, most of its play from. And that's why I think Tyler Meares could fit in well. Is he looking for more playing time? Is he looking for a starting role? That could be the bugaboo that could catch him in terms of his decision to attend BYU. If I was Kevin Young and I was kind of projecting the future for him, I'd point out that come this time next year, you will have Dawson Baker and Richie Saunders who are out of eligibility and on to the next thing. And that opens up 2 prime wing spots. AJ Dybantsa, if everything goes according to plan, and I fully expect it to, he will be off to the NBA draft as a presumptive number 1 overall pick. That leaves a dearth of opportunities or a dearth of talent at the wing positions. And that's got to be part of the pitch, I think, here for Tyler Meares on his visit is that, yeah, this year you may be a spot role guy. You're a role player in our offense, but come next year, if you continue to develop, because he has multiple years of eligibility remaining, I believe he'll be a junior this coming season. He'll have 2 years of eligibility. You could tell him as a senior, that opportunity for you to be one of the premier guys, one of our premier wing players, it's right there for the taking. Are you willing to accept that role and develop in this system? If he is, great. I think it's a fantastic pickup. The other things BYU still looking for in my mind, a true rim protector, a guy who can absolutely protect the rim at all costs, maybe at the expense of offensive prowess, but I think BYU has proven that they're big men, especially a guy like Keba Keita. Yeah, he may not have the most sophisticated offensive ability, but as a lob threat and just being an absolute animal on the defensive end of the court, That's what you need from your big men. So I think Miras fits what BYU needs in terms of wing shooting. Then you need a big man still, and I still think you need a backup point guard. Those are kind of the three key things BYU has to find with its 4 remaining roster slots. Now, we'll see who they ultimately land. I still believe that there's at least 1 or 2 players in the overseas market, whether that's in Europe or Africa or literally anywhere else on the globe, that BYU's tentacles with its recruiting reach go. They will bring in some guys from overseas. Jaeger Demon has shown that you can come to BYU and succeed. Mihailo Boskovic, the same thing. I think Kadim Mboop, with his expected arrival and ultimate emergence, hopefully this year for BYU, he shows that African players can emerge. I think Keba Keita is evidence of that. Fousseyni Traore, who just ran out of eligibility, he's that same thing. What BYU is trying to build is the most well-rounded unit and roster that they can find, and they're ticking off just the needs as they go along. And if Tyler Miras wants to be a part of it, he absolutely fits what BYU needs, I believe, in this upcoming edition of the BYU basketball program. I hope he accepts the role, because you can't teach his length. You can't teach his ability to shoot the basketball. And it appears that he is still got a lot of basketball in front of him. He's a younger player, as I mentioned, just a sophomore. He had a medical red shirt his first year at Idaho after originally transferring in, I believe it was from Alaska Fairbanks, a D2 school up there in Alaska. So he is a well-traveled player, but he has found success at the D2 level, now at the G5 level. Can he add success to his resume at the Power 5 level? And that's the question that remains to be seen. But I do think this is a very steady and good pickup for BYU if Tyler Miras likes what he sees about BYU and ultimately signs on the dotted line. You can't be too hasty, I feel like, for Kevin Young and saying he's got to fill out his roster right now. I would expect the BYU's roster probably remains in flux until June. That's the crazy thing about this. It will get past the NBA draft until I feel like they'll finally secure everything. And we saw that they added Mihailo Boskovic. I don't remember what time in the summer last year they added him to the roster. There is a lot of machinations and a lot of movement that you could still expect for BYU, but I think if you hold a couple of roster slots open, that's great. But I think Tyler Miras is exactly what you need right now. And if he wants to sign up to play for BYU basketball, you take him and you make do and find the other options, I said, like needs-wise, out there on the open market, whether it's via the transfer portal, whether it's via the international market. You go and find the guys that you need. But I think this is a young man in Tyler Miras that fits one of the key needs remaining on BYU's roster. And I hope he picks the Cougars, because I really like the numbers. Everything seems to add up to him being a productive player for Kevin Young and company. And I think you could do a lot worse than adding a kid like this to your roster. All right, coming up next, we were going to talk about a guy who's already committed. He says 100% committed to the BYU football program. Who is Reggie Frischnecht? We're going to introduce you to him next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group today. Get up to speed on everything I am hearing about BYU sports. Coming to your phone in the form of a text message. They got much more direct than that. The best part is you get a 14-day free trial. See if it's the right option for you, and just $4.99 a month to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group after that. So sign up today. Links are in the show notes, whether you're watching and or listening to this, and we'll see you in the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk about a new addition to the BYU football program via the transfer portal, and that is one Reggie Frischnecht. Now, he's got a little bit of an interesting backstory. Those of you who pay attention to Utah high school football may not know Reggie's backstory even as much as I do, and I had to learn a little bit about myself. The thing about it is I knew that Reggie was a guy who was an absolute sensation when he was playing at Manti High School. Now, Manti High School has been competing, if I recall correctly, at the 3A level and may have actually been at the 2A level that he competed at in his high school career. Traditionally, guys from anything lower than the 4A ranks in the state of Utah are all but written off by a lot of high-level Division I coaches, especially at the Power 4 level. There's just a lot of question marks about, okay, does their ability translate over? The level of competition they're playing against, is it really up to speed as what you'd see in the 4, 5, or 6A ranks in Utah high school football? Well, Reggie Frischknecht showed that what he showed at the high school level, which is absolute dynamite in terms of his overall production. I wrote this down when I looked him up. 163 career receptions over his 3 or 4 seasons at Manti, 2,709 yards, and 40, count them, 40 touchdowns. 40 touchdowns in his career. His senior season at Manti, 93 receptions, 1,360 yards, and just 17 touchdowns alone in that season. He was a guy that was a routine all-conference player of the week type caliber player his entire senior season for Manti. Well, that did not translate into a lot of high-level interest from colleges, and he ultimately enrolled literally just down the street at Snow College in Ephraim, Utah. Now, any of you who are familiar with Central Utah, Manti is neighbors with Ephraim in many respects. They kind of feel like they're the Provo and Orem of Central Utah, where they're literally like one and the same in many respects. I know. Don't get mad at me, Manti people. Don't get mad at me, Ephraim people. I've got siblings who went to Ephraim. I've been down there. I'm aware, but it's that close. And he went to Snow College this past year and had an absolutely marvelous freshman campaign. He ultimately emerged from this past season with 38 receptions for the Badgers, 740 yards, and 14 touchdowns. He's a touchdown machine, more than double of his next closest teammate and the most at the NJCAA level, which is the National Junior College Association of America. It's the NCAA for junior colleges. He was absolutely awesome. And as a full qualifier out of high school, he didn't have to go to the junior college route. He was able to enroll at a 4-year university as soon as that season ended. And he ultimately signed during the winter months with Weber State. Now, he went to Weber State, went through spring ball, and I think ultimately decided, you know what? I think I'm better than this level, because he re-entered the transfer portal. I can only read into that from my vantage point that he went to Weber State, realized, you know what? I'm better than playing at the FCS level, ultimately decided to go back out on the open market, and BYU, by virtue of losing guys like Keelan Marion to the transfer portal, need a wide receiver or two to fill out the roster here. The bigger thing, I think, for a guy like Reggie Frischknecht is he has got size on his size. That's one thing I have not mentioned yet. He's 6'4". You can't teach that size as a wide receiver. And playing at the 2 or 3A level that Manti competed at, he is a man amongst boys at that size, at that level of football. And I think some of the question marks, okay, how does that translate over? I've also been told he runs somewhere in the 4.5s in terms of his overall speed. So at 6'4", listed at between 190 and 200 pounds. And if he runs a 4.5, how in the world did this guy not get picked up at some level other than what BYU is getting him at right now as a 4-year qualifier with 3 years to play? This could be a really, really savvy pickup for Fesi Sitake and company, because Fesi has shown that big-bodied receivers in BYU's offense can succeed. Look no further than Chase Roberts. Chase Roberts is not 6'4". I think he's listed at 6'3", but they have had success with big-bodied receivers. Neil Pau'u, who actually coached Reggie down at Snow College, what was Neil, 6'4" himself? They've had Cody Hoffman in the past. They've had Austin College. Guys who were 6'3", 6'4", Mitch Matthews at 6'6". They have had Nick Kurtz. Man, I'm pulling out all kinds of names. You remember Nick Kurtz? Yeah, the 6'6" giant himself. A lot of really, really tall, good receivers in BYU's recent history. And I think that's what Reggie Frischknecht's got to look at here. Now, is he going to come to BYU and start right away? I would highly doubt that. He will have to come in, learn the playbook, compete for playing time with a lot of other wide receivers who are chomping at the bit to show what they're capable of. I figure BYU's projected starting wide receiver trio for me right now is Chase Roberts, JoJo Phillips, and Parker Kingston. Now, at 6'4", he's not going to likely play the slot position that Parker Kingston occupies, but he could fill in at either spot between JoJo or Chase Roberts. But that does not include guys like Cody Hagan, Tei Nakua, Marquise Taliulu, Dominique McKenzie, LaMason Waller. There's a lot of wide receivers on this roster for BYU. Had already opportunities to go through spring camp and show themselves what they're capable of to the coaches, that a guy like Reggie Frischknecht has to come in and unseat for playing time. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it's unlikely. All I am saying is that this is if you want to call it a gamble, this is the right type of gamble for BYU to take. He proved himself at the junior college level. We have seen junior college players succeed at BYU at high levels across the board at literally every position you can name on the gridiron. I think Reggie Frischknecht, if 6'4", 200 pounds, the production he had in high school, combined with what he produced at Snow College, yeah, this is the right type of guy to bring in. And yes, maybe this year he plays a bit of a role, where he's maybe playing special teams, kind of learning the offense, getting up to speed. But then as a junior and senior in 2026, 2027, does he emerge finally and make the position his own? That is the ideal scenario for Reggie Frischnecht could do for BYU. His name's not easy to say. Frischnecht is going to be one that a lot of people out there are going to butcher. And I was doing some research on him, and there's a really funny story written by an ESPN reporter about Reggie's dad. Now, Reggie's dad, Devin, also was a junior college star at Snow College, ultimately went to Washington State, played for the Red Cougars, as it were, up there on the Palouse, and apparently had a breakout performance in this individual game. And the story that ESPN wrote said that his name was just butchered time after time after time in the game that he starred in for the Washington State Cougars, the Wazoo Cougars. Now, Reggie obviously coming closer to home, I think this could be a really, really good time for him to join the program, because he's not going to come in, as I mentioned, with the expectation he's got to step into a starting role. He's got to be the guy. He's got to produce at this level. That is not the case here. He's got time on his side because, as I mentioned, he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining. He's got a redshirt year as well. So if he comes in and he falls too far behind, you just redshirt him this year. You let him really train, get up to speed, work out with BYU strength and conditioning coaches, learn the playbook inside and out, and then maybe unleash him next year as a redshirt sophomore who's got 3 years of eligibility to really make an imprint on this BYU football program. I don't think Reggie will be the last wide receiver BYU looks at. I think there's a lot of guys out there. Tiger Bachmeier is a big name out there who just recently entered the transfer portal from Stanford. The Bachmeier family, his brother as well, there's Hank, there's Bear. Hank already played out his eligibility, but Bear was a 4-star quarterback prospect, while him and Tiger, which, by the way, incredible names, Hank, Bear, and Tiger Bachmeier. What a trio of names there. But the 2 younger Bachmeier brothers are in the transfer portal, leaving Stanford. Could BYU swoop in and pick them up? We'll see. There's been some rumor about BYU's interest in them. I know there was interest in them when they were in the high school ranks. Could that come back around this time? I think a guy like Tiger Bachmeier, I think he could be like a Reggie Frischnecht, a savvy pickup for Fesi Sitake if he's interested in taking on that role. But the good news is Reggie, I think, is going to become a guy that BYU fans are going to be excited to root for. And the nice part is he's one of those fun stories that comes out of small school Utah high school football and emerges as what could be a really, really fine player for BYU. I think the best example of it right now is Bruce Mitchell. Bruce Mitchell played at South Summit High School up there in Camas, Utah. It's two-way football. And Bruce was a man amongst boys. And I watched him with my own eyes, and I had question marks if it was going to translate over when he committed to BYU. Well, it didn't translate over when he signed as a defensive lineman, but since coming over to the offensive line, he's been an absolute revelation as BYU's projected starting center this year. You can find those guys at the lower ranks of the high school football level in Utah. Just as a little more extra digging to unearth that proverbial diamond in the rough along the way. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Tomorrow, it is May, the 5th month of the year begins tomorrow. It has flown by, but as always, thank you for your support of the podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well out there. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And as always, thank you for being an everydayer with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.